Hi there, Chagai. We're going live. Give me a moment here.
What are you playing with? Kaya.
Okay, I'm just sharing this on a couple of other platforms and we'll be ready to go. Video, Good evening, Killer Gittel. Two more shares. We're almost there. I'm giving people a chance to join. Good evening, Danielle. Wasn't sharing. Yeah. Oh, someone just came in. I bet that was Seth. Good evening, Carmen. There we go. Okay, we are set, ready to roll, locked and loaded, metaphorically. Okay, here I got my Zoom in front of me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, you can't really see it from, maybe I can move the camera for a second. See all those images of books? Like today, I'm like a fancy rabbi. I had to schlep all my books to the shul with me. So I look like a learned man, a very knowledgeable man, when you could throw around books and have quotes but the truth is that it's just a fascinating topic. And it really, this afternoon when I was preparing for class, my mind started having a lot of fun in my library. So I brought a bunch of my books with me to class because I think we're going to have a little bit of fun tonight on the importance. And I'll tell you straight up what the subject is, the importance and how you are supposed to treat your employees after they don't work for you anymore. So the very distracting. Hello. Very good. So everyone knows how, the Torah tells us how to treat employees when they work for you. But how do you treat employees when they're finishing their job with you? What does the Torah tell us about that? Is there guidance that is supposed to guide us as Jews in how we're supposed to treat those employees when they're on the way out? So let's start right in the Chumash, in our Chumash on page 1154. So if you have the Chumash we use in class, the Life Chumash, 1155. In the book of Deuteronomy, the fourth portion, we did Devarim, we did Va'et Hanan, we did Ekev, and now we're doing Re'eh. Says the Torah, if one of your brethren, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you by the courts, he should work for you for 6 years, and in the 7th year should send him away free from you. So we know that slavery in Judaism is something that has a limitation. You go out either during the sabbatical year or you go out in the Jubilee year, which is the 50th year. But here's where I want to get to today. Very, very powerful words, and we're going to delve into them. When you send him away free from you, you should not let him go empty-handed. You should give him many gifts from your flock, your threshing floor, or from your wine vat, or you should give him from whatever God your God has blessed you with. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt and that God your God redeemed you. Therefore, I'm commanding you today to do this thing. Then it goes on to tell you if he doesn't want to leave and he wants to stay, but assuming everything goes as planned, the 6 years of enslavement is over. You have a Hebrew Jewish man or a maidservant or a slave that's working for you. Obviously, we're talking about when slavery was still a thing. And now their time to leave has come. You must give them gifts. And he specifies, give them from your flock, from your threshing floor, from the grain, from your wine vat. Give them sustenance, give them gifts when they leave you. That's a biblical verse. This is not some custom. It's straight here in the verse. I want to quote to you from Maimonides, the great codifier of Jewish law, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon in the 12th century. The Rambam in the Laws of Slaves, chapter 3, halacha 14 says as follows. Whoever sends away his servant or maidservant empty-handed transgresses a negative commandment. As Deuteronomy states, do not send them away empty-handed. The verse also made provision for this to be remedied with a positive commandment, as states, you shall certainly give him a severance gift. This applies to a Hebrew servant who's released at the conclusion of his 6 years of servitude, at the advent of the Jubilee, or at the death of his master. So, Jubilee year, the 50th year, after 7 cycles of the sabbatical year, and at the sabbatical year itself, so every 7th year, or if the master dies, the family of the master should make sure that the servant or the maidservant goes away with a decent amount. And the Gemara, the Talmud discusses what you have to give them. You shouldn't give them less than 30 sloyim, 30 selah, whatever that currency meant back then. You don't send them empty-handed. And not only that, Maimonides says something very interesting, which is sort of to circumvent any type of Baba Maisa that Jews will come up with. He says, the severance gift must be given whether the master's household was blessed because of the servant's presence or whether it was not blessed. Meaning whether you think your servant did a good job or not is not relevant. If his time is up, don't throw him to the dogs. Don't throw him on the street without making sure he has some basic provision so he can start his life over. Very, very interesting because it starts a conversation about this important topic of ensuring that you don't throw someone out or free someone from servitude or from any situation in which you're not giving them the tools and the ability to start over. Right? Today's class is not about imprisonment. It's not about the jail system, the prison system. But think about it. How often does someone come out of jail, their time is up, they have no family there to welcome them, they're expected to start on their own 2 feet with what? With the $7 they earned working in the slave labor in the prison? There's no system of severance. There's no system where they're getting things. Or even a system where they're put into a workplace where they now can work to earn a living. Quite the contrary. How does it work in the United States? I can only speak about the United States. Now you have a record. Who wants to hire someone with a record? It's very rare. Someone has to have a lot of faith and trust that you're going to be a devoted employee and a loyal employee and a trustworthy person. So the idea of ensuring that when someone is let out into the big bad world, or just the big world, they have the ability and the provisions to start over is a very important thing. I know someone that was once let out. I used to visit him when he was an inmate here in Montana State Prison. Eventually he was transferred to Oregon and he fought for his redemption. He fought for his freedom. He got his freedom, but you think they were kind? At 3 o'clock in the morning, they dropped him off in the middle of somewhere in Oregon, the side of the road, and garnish, go figure yourself out, right? So it's a vital thing to make sure that the people have what they need. So the Rambam says, Maimonides says, that if someone is being let go, meaning his time is up, not if he left early. If he paid his way out to leave early, the obligation doesn't apply. But if either the master died, or the Jubilee year came, or the sabbatical year came, the Shemitah year came, you have to give him gifts. Does this apply to someone who sold himself into slavery? Or does it only apply to someone that was sold because he was a thief, was sold by the rabbinic court, by the Bet Din, into slavery. So let's read what the Sefer HaChinuch writes. Sefer HaChinuch, we don't know the author, but he's one of the Rishonim all the way back in the early days, the 13th, 14th century. He says like this, quote, you have to give a Jewish slave when he leaves our home for freedom, don't send him empty-handed because of the verse that we just read. Why? Says the Sefer HaChinuch, listen to these words. L'manikna benafshenu, so that we embed within our soul midos mu'ulas, good attributes, yekaris v'chamudas, praiseworthy and treacherous, not treacherous, but praiseworthy and delicious attributes. In other words, we need to train ourselves to be healthy, good, kind-hearted people. And when your slave is leaving and you send him off with provisions, you are training yourself to be a kinder, gentler, more compassionate, empathetic individual. And when you have such a delicate, sensitive soul, you will merit lots of good. The good God, He wants to do good for us. And He encouraged us and adorned us with His ability to have mercy on those who work for us. And everything He's given us is only from His kindness, so that we should be able to be kind to others. To give this person more than just what he earned from his salary. It's a very logical thing. I don't have to go at length about it. What's interesting is that the Sefer HaChinuch says, the Sefer HaChinuch accepts the Tosfos' opinion. What is the Tosfos' opinion? That even someone that sold himself as a slave, he was destitute, he was struggling, and he had no other choice, and he went and sold himself into slavery. Seemingly, I can say, well, you sold yourself as a slave to me. I don't owe you anything. When you're done your 6 years, Gegangen, go. You aren't forced to become a slave. You chose to be a slave. Sefer HaChinuch says that he believes, the Sefer HaChinuch believes, that even someone that sold himself into slavery, so logically you can justify not giving them provisions when they're done, because the Beis Din didn't force him to do it. He did it on his own. Even then, or maybe even specifically then, you have to go out of your way to show kindness and compassion to give this person provisions to get on their way. We're not talking about millions of dollars or lawsuits and settlements. It's giving them a basic necessity so they can get moving in life. Now the Rambam, Maimonides, it seems clear. The Maimonides, it seems clear, does not agree with that. Maimonides believes that only if you were sold by the Bet Din, you were forced into slavery, do you have to receive provisions to get going. Not if you sold yourself. But the Sefer HaChinuch says no, even if you sold yourself. And it's interesting because the Rebbe in what year was it? I think it was 1977. The Rebbe addressed is generally, as a rule, the Sefer HaChinuch and the Rambam, Maimonides, don't really argue. And yet over here it seems that Sefer HaChinuch says that even someone that sold himself into slavery should still get provisions, and the Rambam says only if you were sold by the Bet Din. Are they really arguing? To quote the Minchas Chinuch, he says it's very odd Shaharava Mechaber that the author, the Sefer HaChinuch, Yenoite Midasa Rambam will be different than the Rambam. Im Shalei Pirish Gladi, unless he says clearly I'm arguing with the Rambam. So does he argue with the Rambam or not? Says the Rebbe, not necessarily. This is a side note, by the way. Why not? There's two reasons for why you would give provisions to a slave that finished their term. Number one, it's part of the obligation as part of their employment, part of their servitude, that when they leave, you need to make sure they have some provisions to get going. Or it's not part of your obligation in the sense of the slavery master relationship, but it's part of the mitzvah of tzedakah. That when you see a person who's working for you that's leaving empty-handed, they have nothing. So whether you're obligated to give them severance or not, it's not relevant. You have an obligation from a tzedakah perspective, from a charity perspective, from a righteousness perspective to take care of them. So maybe, says the Rebbe, the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch are not really arguing. They both agree that if your employee, your slave is leaving after 6 years or at the Jubilee year, or if the master dies, the family has to provide them with provisions. The question is why? Sefer HaChinuch says it's part of the obligation of a master to a servant, and the Rambam will tell you it's part of the obligation to give charity. But the bottom line is the recipient, the slave, will get it in either case, which is important. Because sometimes we say, well, technically, I don't owe this person anything. He worked in my company for 92 years. I paid him every year, and I gave him bonuses in his Roth IRA and whatever, 401k. I don't owe him jack. Okay, maybe you don't owe him anything, but let's assume the guy walks out the door. From the minute he walks out the door of your company, he doesn't have a way to pay his most basic bills, because for the last 92 years of working for you, he was relying paycheck to paycheck to do all that. So you may not be obligated as an employer, as a master, to do that. What about the mitzvah of tzedakah? You know someone right before you who needs the money. You got to take care of him. It's the greatest opportunity for tzedakah right in front of you. But it gets even more interesting, because what about today? What about today? There's a lot of times in the rabbinic courts, till today, I'm talking about in 2024, where someone leaves a job, and when he's fired, or when he's let go, or when the time is up, the contract is up, they say, hey, I need Hanukkah, I need severance. Well, what does it say in your contract? Well, it doesn't say anything about Hanukkah in my contract. Do I have to give him anything? And many times, by the way, this debate ends up in front of a rabbinical tribunal, in front of a Beit Din. So I asked one of my rabbis today that I consulted, I said, by the way, halachically, biblically, are you obligated to give that to your employee? He says, bottom line is no. There's some opinions that say it's biblical, some opinions say it's rabbinic, but you know what the Minchas Chinuch says? He says something even more beautiful, says the Sefer HaChinuch, and I think this is important. I'm going to read his words and translate, because it really spoke to my heart about how often Judaism gets distorted by ideological things that always sound black and white. Oh, you're part of this, you're part of this, you're part of that, you're this, you're that. Judaism believes this, Judaism believes this. Let's read from the holy book, straight from the source. And then you'll see the beautiful nuance that is Judaism that we love and cherish. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, this mitzvah is for males and females in the days of the temple, because the laws of servitude only apply when the Jubilee applies, and doesn't apply for already thousands of years. And here's the key. Umi kalmaka, nevertheless, af bizman hazeh, even in today's day, Yishma Chacham v'Yosef Lekach. May wise people listen and learn a lesson. Shim Sachar Echad Ne'Yisrael, if you hire a fellow Jew, v'Avodah Izman Merubah, and he worked for you a long time, Oyafilu Muad, or even a short time, Sheyanek LeVitzesim Imoy, you should give him severance when he leaves the workplace, when he's gone, when he's leaving. May Asher Berche Hashem, from whatever God has gifted you. So if God has gifted you and you have an employee that's leaving, you're not obligated. You're not. In today's day, according to the majority of opinions, not biblically, not rabbinically, you're not mandated. But you should. It is our custom, he says. You should be wise and have the custom to nevertheless give a severance. Don't be so stuck in your contracts. Don't be so stuck in your square. Oh, he wasn't the best fit for our company, and he made us lose $12 and blah, 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 blah. Don't do that. You want God to be kind to you. You want God to be compassionate to you. You want God to be merciful to you. Show that mercy to the employee. Give them a little extra. And by the way, I mean, you could talk statistically that any company, any business that's ever shown that to their employees, it only benefits the company because the people feel invested and loved in that company. But even putting that aside, just from your moral compass, the employer, the master, you have someone that's before you, you know that they're going to be struggling to find work, and you had to let them go or their time was up, whatever the reason is. Why not show that incredible gesture of kindness, the wise gesture of kindness, to give them some of what God has given you? Such an incredible way to live our lives. So you want to call it tzedakah? Call it tzedakah. You want to call it Hanukkah, which is severance? Call it Hanukkah. But do it. Yeah.
What about somebody who quits?
Someone quits?
Same thing.
No. Well, I mean, they didn't. Quite the contrary.
He's leaving.
He's leaving because he wants to leave. Now you want to go beyond the letter of the law and say, hey, you're quitting. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Here's a few dollars. You could. Quitting means the employee is leaving against the interest of the employer. The employer doesn't want him to leave, otherwise he would have fired him. So he quit. That's very different than someone whose time is just up. The contract's up, and we're not renewing your contract, or we're letting people go because we don't have the money for it anymore. But just give them enough to get on their own 2 feet. Be a mensch. And I say it's beautiful because if it was obligated, it would be obligation. Then you're doing it, you don't know, is the guy doing it because he's compassionate, or is he doing it because, God actually just commanded him, so he doesn't really want to, but he's doing it anyhow. Here, the Torah is giving you the ability to express your empathy and your understanding and your, may I say, courage to show a little bit of humility and kindness to someone who may not be the perfect candidate for it. It's not about your feeling. It's about doing the right thing. America is very stuck in people's feelings. A whole day people have to feel perfect in order to do the right thing. You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to feel good about it. You have to know in your heart that it's the right thing to do and do it. And the chances are eventually it will feel good too, but don't do it because it needs to feel good, and don't wait for it to feel good. It's not relevant. Get it done because it's the right thing to do. And that's what the Minchas Chinuch is saying. It's interesting. On Shabbos, we commemorated the 80th yahrzeit of the Rebbe's father. We spoke about it in Shul. We spoke about it, I think we spoke about it last week. Yeah, we did. And there's an interesting commentary that Reb Leivik, the Rebbe's father of blessed memory, had on the tractate of Kiddushin, the tractate of marriage, which is in the Talmud. There's a full tractate about marriage. He says, think about Joseph, right? Joseph, the original Joseph in the book of Genesis, Jacob's son Joseph, the dreamer, he was a Jewish slave. Remember, he was a slave to who? To Potiphar. In Egypt, he was sold as a slave. When he was freed, did he get severance? Says the Rebbe's father, he got severance. What was his severance? Number one, he was given the ring and the cloak of Pharaoh, and they had him riding on the royal entourage carriage. Furthermore, that was from Pharaoh. God gave him, the angel Gabriel was gifted to Joseph to teach him 70 languages. And then the name Hey was added to his name from Yosef to Yehoseph, one of God's letters of his name. We see in Psalms, his name was Yehoseph instead of Yosef. The letter Hey was added as a gift. But says, hold on, his master wasn't God, his master was Potiphar. So did his master give him any severance? Says the Rebbe, yeah. Says the Rebbe's father, yeah. You know what his father-in-law, you know what his master gave him? Gave him his daughter Asnas. Who was Joseph's wife? Joseph's wife was Asnas. Who was Asnas? The daughter of Potiphar and Potiphar's wife. Hold on. It was the daughter of Potiphar and Potiphar's wife. So Joseph's wife was a gift to him from his master. So his master gave him severance, the greatest severance you could ever ask for, which is a wonderful wife. But we see that God gave him severance and his master gave him severance. Now, to your point that it was his niece, there is a medrash that says that who was Asnas? Asnas was the adopted daughter of Potiphar, but who was she in real life? She was the daughter of Dinah when Dinah was raped by Shechem. In the book of Genesis, when she was raped and violated by Shechem, and she had a baby, the baby was this kid, Asnas, who the brothers, Shimon and Levi, didn't want living in the neighborhood because it was too embarrassing. So they sent her to Egypt, and eventually she was raised by Potiphar, and eventually became a wife to her uncle, but not her uncle from her. It was only a paternal uncle, not a maternal uncle. Remember, Jacob had 4 wives. So Joseph was the daughter of Rachel. Dinah was the daughter of Leah. So it was a niece, but not a direct niece, an indirect niece, if that makes sense to anyone that followed what I just said. You can listen later, and you could do it. You know, the slow mode. You can listen to it in slow mode. Exactly. So we see that this concept of severance, the idea of giving a hanukah, is a very, very proper, factual way to show kindness, empathy, and compassion. And really gives us, all of us, an ability to understand the importance of putting someone on their own 2 feet when they're done whatever situation, right? You say, oh, well, I just send him, he was at my house for Shabbos, nice seeing you, goodbye. Did you give him a sandwich to take along? I mean, you're leaving them just to roam alone? I'm not telling you that you're obligated to do that. I'm just telling you the mentality of always making sure that people have a way to get going. Someone told me recently that Warren Buffett's son, there was a 60-minute thing about Warren Buffett's son many years ago, how he works on his farm in Iowa. He has a farm, he's a farmer. And, Warren Buffett has given away or is giving away the vast majority of his wealth to charity. So when his son was buying the ranch, he came to his father to get a loan to buy the ranch. And his father could buy the whole Iowa. He doesn't have to just buy the ranch. He could have bought the whole Iowa for him. But his father gave him the loan, and he said, I'll give it to you at whatever the interest rates are in the market these days, meaning not going to make more money off of you, not going to make less money off of you. So what was the only plus he got out of it? They didn't have to go through the scrutiny of the bank to get approved for the loan because his father gave him the loan. But everything else about the loan was just like it was at a bank, right? So maybe that's extreme. Personally, I think it is extreme. If you can help your child a little bit more, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful thing. But my point is, our job is to get people on their own 2 feet to be standing on their own. You don't have to enable them. Enabling is a terrible thing. You don't have to give them a trust fund, or as we call here in Bozeman, the trustafarians that live like bums and they have money sitting in the bank because their grandmother gave it to them. You want them to be functional, meaningful, productive members of society. But to put someone who just finished 6 years of slavery, or 49 years, it's now the Jubilee year, it's time for him to go, and he has nothing. You were giving him food for 6 years, you were giving him a place to live, he has nothing, he has nowhere to go, nothing to eat. Give him 30 sloyim, give him some cash, give him some wine, give him some grain, give him a cow or two, give him a shepsela, give him a sheep, so he can start his life over. That is the Jewish value that's embedded in this mitzvah right here in our Torah portion, the mitzvah of severance, Hanukkah. Now, there's one last nakuda, there's one last detail I want to focus on. When the verse says that you should give him for whatever God has blessed you with, and then it says, remember that you were a slave in Egypt and God took you out of Egypt, and that's why I'm commanding you this day. Rashi, the Medrash says, you should remember that you were a slave in Egypt. I gifted you severance when you left Egypt, and I gave you more severance. Do the same. Give and give. In other words, the Medrash is saying that since God gave us severance when we left Egypt, what was the severance? The Jews took wagons and donkeys full of wealth out of Egypt that God had allowed them to take from Egypt. And then by the splitting of the sea, when the Egyptians drowned, all that gold and silver came on the shore and the Jews collected it. So God indirectly gave them all of this severance. Therefore, you should do the same with your employee, with your servant. Now, the question is, number one, if that's what God intended us to understand, why didn't he say that in the verse? You should give them severance because I gave you severance when I took you out of Egypt. He didn't say that. He just said, you'll remember that I took you out of Egypt and you should therefore give severance. Why isn't he more clear? And second of all, what's the comparison? God wants us to give our employers or our servants severance. But in Egypt, our master, who was the master in Egypt? The Egyptians. They didn't give us anything. God allowed for us to take. So it was a gift from God. It wasn't from the master. So here's where the Rebbe analyzes something so beautiful. Hear me out. There's two things we try to accomplish with severance. One is from the master's perspective, and one is from the servant's perspective. From the master's perspective, it shows our gratitude to our employee and allows for us to ingrain within ourselves that level of kindness and compassion. The more we are grateful to people in our lives who were good to us, the more we are better, the better we are as individuals, and we become even better. From the servant's perspective, the goal is that they have whatever they need so they don't go empty-handed, so they can start their life over with having some type of financial stability. So for a slave, for the servant, getting severance is actually part of their freedom process. They cannot be fully free if they don't have severance. Think about that. The master who's giving the severance has a lot to gain from giving it. But whether he gives it or not, it doesn't change who he is. He's the same individual before and after. The servant, if the servant is let go, freed, without financial backing to start over, he's not really free. His life is a misery. It's like letting someone out of a state prison or a federal penitentiary and not having them. So are they really free? Free of what? In jail, they had food, they had a place to sleep, they had a roof over their head, they had AC, they had a television, they had internet, they had everything. Now they're free. Are they really free, or is it worse? What the Torah is teaching us, what the Medrash is telling us, is that if we remember that we were slaves in Egypt, it's not about teaching us how the master should feel. Whether God is the master or the Egyptians are the master, who's giving the severance. It's all about, from the recipient's perspective, from the servant's perspective, from the servant's perspective, what we learn from Egypt more than anything else is that in order for the Jewish people to have been considered free after they left Egypt, God needed to make sure they had some financial support, because they wouldn't actually be considered free without it. That's why the verse says, remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt and God redeemed you, meaning your redemption was dependent on the severance that you picked up at the sea and the severance you picked up from the Egyptians, which teaches us that if we are to free someone from servitude under us, it's not truly freedom if we don't give them the ability to get on their own 2 feet. Because if they have no way to start over, what have we really done here? But you always hear these people talk about slavery, and they talk about whether slaves were better off under their master's rule because at least they were taken care of. And it's a big debate. In some societies, that was a very logical conclusion, that people who lived, even though they were slaves, and them and their families lived in servitude, but they were practically better off because they were taken care of. But it doesn't have to be either or. No, you could be let go, and if your master actually gives you what you need to start over on your own, independently, not just let you go to the, let you loose to the wolves and wonder why you couldn't figure it out. Well, no, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like all the macho people say. What do you mean pull you up? With what? You left me, my wife, my children, we're on the street. We have nothing. Give me a kupka. Give me give me $1,000 so I can start over. Do you know how many times we at this shul have given people $1,000, $1,500 to help them start a situation or get out of a situation? And almost every time, I can't say 100%, but almost every time it has changed lives and allowed people to get back on their own feet. It may sound silly, $1,000, come on. No. $1,000 many times is the difference between feeding your children, buying your new contact lenses so you can see, filling up gas in your car, fixing a motor. So enabling is a problem. Giving money to drug addicts is terrible, but don't let that be the excuse for not being a kind, compassionate, empathetic individual who wants to help people get on their own 2 feet. And don't assume that just because you freed them from collective slavery or from individual slavery, servitude, that suddenly now it's all going to be figured out because they're free. Because freedom without financial foundation isn't really freedom. And we learned that from Egypt. So I can't solve societal issues. Meaning I'm one man with one vote, like everyone else in this country. I think most people have one vote. I mean, in some states you can get 2, but most of us only have one vote. I'm one of those people that only has one vote. And I can choose how I want to see our government operate. But forget about the government for a moment. We get to choose every day how we want our communities to operate. That when we let an employee go because we can't afford to keep them anymore, okay, that happens to companies. They can't afford it. But you can't give the guy a couple grand to get started out on it. They say, thank you, man. You worked for our company for so long. It's the right thing to do, man. I don't want to let you I don't want to let you go to the wolves.
Until you get back on your feet.
I can't bankroll everything, but here, I just don't want to let you go empty-handed. You know how far that goes, both in making us better people, making the recipients happier people and more appreciated. They feel appreciated, and it makes our world go round in a healthy way. Money is such a stickler. When the truth is, money comes and goes. And if you have a few extra bucks and you can help someone and you can get them on their own feet, why not? The Torah wants us. The Torah doesn't want to obligate us. By slavery, in the years of Jubilee, it's an obligation. Today, it's not an obligation. It's a training process to train us, every one of us. Don't tell me what the government should do to help people. And I won't tell you what the government should do. It's about what you're going to do. We've come to this place where everyone looks to the government to find the solution. Most employment issues are not the government-based. They're just human being to human being with compassion or with achzarius, with a cruelty. How many people are let go from work with cruelty? What do you mean I don't have a job anymore? I came here today like every other day. I was ready to go to work. Sorry. We closed down last night. We shut off in the middle of the night and we're gone. Our offices are empty. It happened here in Bozeman. Right before COVID. A very popular spa, nail place, whatever, Weibische Geschäften place, where they did their, where you do your no, not a salon, a spa of some sort. Everyone woke up one morning. There was hundreds of people in Bozeman that had gift cards to this place because people had, they had bought them or they were gifted them. The furniture was empty in the middle of the night. The place was empty in the morning. Employees woke up to find out it's gone. That's a mensch. That's a Torah way. They weren't Jewish, so again, they didn't learn this stuff, but we are. And we have to be different. We have to be different and show that level of devotion, compassion, care, and concern with the empathy that every human being deserves. We learned that from slaves, but it's not limited to slaves. It's for every one of us and how we interact with our employees, how we interact with those around us. And that's what makes the world a great place. That's what makes the world a precious, holy, spiritual, kind kingdom of God until we merit the ultimate time where there will be no more jealousy, there will be no more money issues, there will be no more hunger and homelessness, there will be no more nastiness with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. May it be speedily nowadays. Amen. Have a rockin' rest of the week. At Shabbos Nevarchim this Shabbos, we're going to bless the new month of Elul, which means we're only 5 weeks away from Rosh Hashanah, baby. New Year is coming, 5785, around the corner. Buckle up, get ready. We'll see you back here. Bezrat Hashem. Next week, have a super duper Labor Day for all of you that are in labor, and we'll see you soon. If you're in labor.